Good evening. So, I think I am audible and visible everything, right? Arnav, can you confirm?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, uh, till yesterday, what we discussed that we can have some source that can be sharp Poissonian, and but the if photo detector or any detection is adding some noise, then actually it can spoil the paste. So two things required. One thing is that you need really a sub-Poissonian source, which is actually quantum nature, which cannot be explained classically, and that sub-Poissonian photon source should be detected with high efficiency. So detector also play. If it, detector efficiency is low, then I think it even sub-Poissonian can become Poissonian and even worse. So that's the issue. With that, I think we should move on to a certain understanding. Okay, suppose we create a sub-Poissonian source. For example, we have given some examples also uh, how to get some kind of subsort noise level detection. But if you have one source and which is actually giving you sub-Poissonian, how to how to really tell, how to quantify that is actually sub-Poissonian? Meaning that is actually quantum nature is there, because all the super Poissonian and Poissonian distribution, they could be explained classically, and their detection is actually, we assume some kind of quantum nature energy is being absorbed. Semi-classically it could be explained, but sub-Poissonian light source, you don't have any classical explanation, you need really quantum explanation. And for that quantum explanation, at least your measurement should ensure that you are getting a sub-Poissonian source. Okay, so so people try it and try it based on their existing knowledge, existing experiment, and they found that indeed it is possible to measure and quantify correctly that whether that photon source is a sub-Poissonian or not, or quantum nature is there, or classically whatever we are getting detected. So based on that system, again we classify sources in different ways. Kind of thing is that say photon bunching, anti-bunching, and of course coherent states. But we will be quantifying that with different measurement, different figure of, using different figure of merit. Okay, that is what the thing. Unless and until we know the technology, how to find out, how to quantify that whether it is quantum nature is there or just classically it is getting detected, you cannot really use them properly or tell them that whether sub-Poissonian or just Poissonian or super Poissonian. So for that purpose, to understand that thing, that particular phenomena, I think a little bit of historical background I thought of discussing, so that it will be easier to understand that how this sub-Poissonian or some kind of photon statistics you can really predict and quantify properly, but particularly by means of some kind of measurement. So this particular experiment actually quantifying the quantum nature, that is actually is well known, called HBT experiment. So this HBT experiment is nothing but I think Hanwari, Brown and Twiss. Hanwari, Brown and Twiss experiment. Okay, that is actually the experimental concept actually evolved for some kind of stellar measurement where those people actually found that some kind of limitation, so they tried to improve for that stellar measurement. Stellar measurement means astronomical experiment, astronomical measurement, astronomy applications, and they improved the system, and later on it is found that that improved system actually is useful to quantify or to qualify whether photon source is the quantum nature of the light source actually you can quantify. So these two famous guy actually it's a British astronomer, Robert Hanbury Brown. He was living between 1916 to 2002. And then just 4 years junior, his assistant basically, Richard Quentin Twiss. These two guys actually developed this experiment, and that experiment actually eventually used for our whatever I said, that quantum phenomena, quantum property of a light source. So they were astronomer, and they were studying one particular instrument called Michelson stellar interferometer. This is the, I think we have already explained earlier Michelson interferometer, right? So I think there is the thing is that the configuration here I am showing little bit different, right? So earlier that Michelson interferometer we have explained for what purpose. Can anyone tell? We discussed Michelson interferometer earlier. Do you remember? Murali Krishnan?
Yes, sir.
What purpose we have discussed?
For the path length difference between the.
For path length difference, for measurement of path length difference, you can just use your scale. Is not it?
Yes.
But why this Michelson interferometer? We discussed, no? I think you, if I can sketch the system, you have a laser source and
Yes,
then you have
sir.
a beam splitter. So to path length, you just introduce some path length difference. The tau is there, or delay, and then you try to measure what? In a photodetector, when one beam is coming, another beam is coming with a delay, and then you measure at a photodetector. Then what you measure basically? What purpose you use that?
Oh, is it for wavelength of the light source?
No. We have explained, I think, just before quiz one, I think, yeah. We have used for certain measurement. Anyone can tell? Remember?
G1 correlation function.
First order correlation function. Who said that?
Animation.
Animesh. Animesh, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that is actually first order correlation function. That is G1, right? You remember that G thing. So E will be there, ET will be there, and ET plus tau, and then you see the correlation and average value of the correlation, then you get G1 tau. That is the correlation function, first order correlation function, and from that we estimate the coherence length of a light source. You remember that coherence length? Because we try to see the visibility, and that visibility actually as a function of your delay tau. visibility, and when the visibility comes down to 1 by 1 over E, certain up to certain length visibility will be there. Visibility, you remember what is the definition of visibility? In an interferometer experiment, what is the definition of visibility? Because I'll be using those terms here also, what I discussed there. You remember what is the visibility, definition of visibility? Ghantashala?
Sir, it's Imax minus Imin by Imax1 plus Imin.
Yes, that is the visibility. So that visibility actually depends on your delay between two arms, right? And then when this if delay is increasing more and more, then this visibility will be dropping, and you find a particular delay where actually the visibility will be dropping significantly to zero almost, right? So that particular delay, time delay, if it is there, that is actually called the coherence time, and corresponding path, if you just calculate the coherence time, c multiplied by tau, that is actually coherence length. So that is basically Michelson interferometer we used for measuring G1 tau, and eventually that G1 tau gives you the coherence length. That is actually because you are measuring the temporal coherence length, the temporal change, the tau. That's why that was called the temporal coherence. So Michelson interferometer earlier we have used for measuring the temporal coherence, right? And now that is a different type of setup. Here it is slightly different setup because this is used for some different application, not for temporal coherence, but it is used to measure the angular diameter of a distant star. If you know that the length, the distance of a star from the Earth, if you know that is known, then using this instrument, so-called Michelson stellar interferometer, you can actually find what is the diameter of that star. Okay. So that time actually people try to know, okay, all this sun is there or nearest, and starting from Newton's, people try to estimate the diameter of the sun and then distant star. But I think Galileo tried with a very primitive way, but those are a very wrong method. But this was the first instrument people used to predict accurately the diameter of a star. How it works, you just see, this is your mirror 1 and mirror 2, and from distant star some light comes. That obviously that is very faint light, you can imagine, right? So it's from light years distance it is coming, for example, right? Okay. And then you have a mirror here, M1, and another mirror is M2, and they are separated with a distance of D. Okay. And then this light collected, that means you are collecting light just keeping these two mirror M1 and M2 for a distance D. And what you are doing, you are just bringing them to a telescopic objective, and in the screen back, you can actually, this objective, what it does actually, this is actually bending this beam and making an interference pattern here. But interference pattern, I mean to say that they are actually screening at the same place. They are at a focal point here. It's coming. So you get a two beam here, and then if these two beams are coming, suppose this line somehow you have some kind of filter is there, So that's a particular wavelength you are actually filtering, for example. You can, from a distant star, you know that, you know what sort of different type of spectral lines comes. Even though faint, you can actually just pick a particular spectral line, and then you are just hitting to the things. Then you can you get a interference pattern. So now my question is that, is this correct that you will be getting an interference pattern? Two beams are coming, right? So why you supposed to see the interference pattern? Do you see any path length difference between these two beam, two ray? Anyone can confirm? Because when we say that some interference pattern will be there, that means two beams should come and we should add some path length difference, then only you supposed to get your interference pattern, right? So here, will you see this interference pattern? And if you see that, because of what you will see? Anyone can tell? Sarad?
There is no path difference,
So you should not see interference, right?
and they are the two light meeting at a single point.
Yeah,
You said the focal point something.
but at the center when they are meeting,
Yes.
there is no path length difference, right?
Yes. But
But away, if you go upward, this is a screen, right?
Yes.
So it is coming, one ray is shown, but it is a beam is coming, right? It's
Yes,
depending on the mirror size.
Yes.
So that beam is, two beams are coming at and they are meeting at an angle, right?
Yes.
After the, so you're supposed to see the interference pattern.
Yes.
Depending on this angle, that means that focal length, etc., you will see what is the fringe patterns, everything you will be seeing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So you will be getting a fringe pattern, right?
Yes.
So once you get the fringe pattern, can you use this to measure your diameter of a distant star? So your objective, your telescope is just directed to a particular star, and you are collecting line to line here, to beams here, and you are just making this thing. So so you are saying something, Sharad?
Yes, that's why in that there are no path length, and but from the center of the screen, from the center, if you go upwards or downwards, there some path difference will be there.
So
That's how we are.
but from this fringe, will you be able to calculate?
Sir, it will basically act like a point source, right? It doesn't matter where, like, you can't really identify any property of the star based on the interference.
Yeah, if it is coming like a point source, if your for example, with respect to this mirror, two mirrors, if you see that this two light ray coming as if like a point source, then you see the interference pattern, perfect interference pattern you will be observing, is not it? With a point source coming here, and then you are getting, and then you are getting a interference pattern, and all along you will be seeing the interference pattern, is not it?
Yes, sir.
But if that is not a point source, with respect to whatever distance you are just considering, so for example, M1 and M2 is not as if it is not receiving like a point source. There is a particular spread is there. Obviously, there is a distant star. There will be a certain spreading is there, right? So if that spreading is somehow sensible to your mirror instead of like a point source, then you see some kind of, depending on that, you see some kind of variation here if you change this D value.
So, sir, depending on the D value, and
suppose D is very small.
okay.
Suppose D is very small, right? That means, I think if you see a distant star, from somewhere light is coming, and then D is small, that means both mirror M1 and M2 will pick up from the almost from the same point of the source, right? As if it will be seeing like a point source, because the ray, because from a distant star, if it is a broad source, and you are just this D is so small that this a certain angle it is coming, only that angle will be observing, and outside whatever will be there, that will not be picked, because this mirror is like that, so it will not be picked. So it will be like a point source. So if D is small, you see the perfect fringe, and when D is large, you are increasing D. Suppose you are increasing this D value, then what happens? This mirror M1 and M2, it will actually try to see light from the wider angle, from the source coming, right? From the source, it will see that it is distant from various point source. It can come to mirror 1, and that will be collected here. And from M2 also, it will be seeing that various point source. That means it will be collecting efficiency will be from the wider range you will be getting spatially. Okay, now you see this is the some mathematical things. It will be very much clearer. The angular spread of the star, meaning delta theta, is suppose you are standing on Earth and watching to the star. For example, that star is sun, for example, and then both end of the sun across the diameter, if you just connect line to your eye, then you see this angle. This is the angle of spreading, angle spreading of sun. Or if it is a star, so you can see that angle spreading coming to your measurement point where you are detecting, that is the angle of angular spread. And if actual D is the diameter and L is the distance from the star, you know, L times delta theta, that will be your diameter, actual diameter. This is the angular spread and D. So diameter can be normally you can consider like a circular arc, no? So radius multiplied by angle subtended, so you get an arc basically. So L times delta theta is the actual diameter. This is, you know, that is a normal geometry you can find out, right? So this is the angle subtended, and the star is, if it is a very, very long distance, you can imagine this delta theta is very, very small. It not be degree, not be seconds. It will be much, much lower than some 10 to the power minus 7, 10 to the power minus 8 or radian or so, something like that. If it is distance is nearest bright star, for example, compared next to our sun, after sun, any nearest one, if you see that, that will be in the order of 10 to the power minus 7 or so. This is just the value, but you want to measure that. Now you see the diffraction limited angular resolution of the stellar interferometer delta theta is given by this one. So this is very important formula. What is that? This D means this one, this separation. Basically, this expression actually we know from aperture of a lens. Suppose it is, I think from the fundamental optics book you can find this aperture, if it is D, and then this is the diffraction limit we know. That means this is the minimum feature size you can actually resolve. Okay, now in this method, because my lens objective is smaller, so smaller the lens, then what happens? Sorry, I should go this way. So here, so if it is smaller, that means smallest angle here, D smaller means this delta theta will be larger. So that means your resolution will be weak, 4. That means you cannot measure this small delta theta value. So to measure this small delta theta value, you have to increase this D value. So this is the method they increased the D value like that. So you your collection efficiency only this much because of your objective. But what you are doing, you are collecting little bit far away. You are making a mirror. This is how you can actually ensure that your resolution can be from this telescope, whatever you can measure, that will be very, very small. So D can be very large, then only this will be smaller. Lambda, as I said, that lambda of the source is known, right? Now you see, small and reasonably bright stars acts like a point source to the interferometer, since delta theta is much, much smaller than lambda by D. So this lambda by D, if delta theta is much, much smaller, it looks like a point source. As long as for a certain practical values of D, if you are considering, practical values of D means, suppose this is an instrument, you know, this D, as I say that D, largest D always better, but you have to see that this largest D you can accommodate in your instrument or not. Okay, so that's the point. But whenever for a certain value, if delta theta is very, very small, it is like a point source. Okay, but if you have a D value such that this delta theta is, okay, delta theta is, that means this angle, whatever angle, is larger than this one, this value, larger than the smallest resolution value. I mean, so this is the smallest value you can measure. But suppose your D lambda you choose such that delta theta is larger. That is, for some practical values of D, so from here, practical values of D greater than this one, 1.22 lambda by delta theta is, if you have this type of D is practical, so that this is greater than this value, the interferometer will be able to resolve the angular spreads of the stars. Okay, because of the spatial incoherence, you see, this is the important sentence, the last sentence. Because of the spatial incoherence of the incoming light, the interference fringe will not observe. You see, now, as I said that whenever D is smaller, whatever the very small, depending on the delta theta value, it will be looking like a point source. So you can get a very good interference fringe. But whenever you are increasing the D value, then what happens? The mirror M1 and M2, they will actually collect light from entire spread of the star. Okay, delta theta, that can be more angle it could be collected. Okay, but thing is that suppose a beam is coming here and another beam is coming here, and if this another beam, when it is coming, that actually collect light from different angular spatial variations. It is not coming as if like from a single point, from the same region. It is actually from certain point it is coming, and also it is coming from other point, and that is also it is coming here. So what does it mean? So I can give you an analogy. For example, why this temporal coherence, whenever we have explained the temporal coherence matters. This temporal coherence is longer when the spectral broadening is that the spectral bandwidth of the laser source you are using. If it is smaller, then the temporal what do you call that? Temporal coherence will be longer. Coherence length will be large. So narrower line width, you can afford to have your interferometer with larger path length difference, right? So that is why it is called temporal coherence. But here what you see that depending on the delta theta, because if your light source, how much angular separation or distance you can afford to have your interference pattern. So that means if you keep on increasing D value, this interference pattern, that means the visibility, that contrast, fringe contrast, that will start dropping because the light is being collected from entire broad source, from all points of the star more and more distributed light from more and more distributed points coming, and that's why your contrast will be reducing. So, and this is actually called how much D you can increase so that you can get a reasonable contrast here. That is actually, it is almost analogous to their path length difference. Here you are not, here really you are increasing the D, but as of here in principle you don't see the path length difference for these two sources. But where is the difference coming? Each source, this source will actually collect light from numerous points of the source, from the source. And when this is actually coming from like a extended source, then this contrast will be reducing. And how much it will be reducing, how much you can afford to increase the D so that the interference pattern will be there, that actually quantifies the spatial coherence of the source. So that is actually called spatial coherence. So you are changing D. Apparently you see there is no path length difference, only angle difference is there from particular point if you see, right? So no path length difference. If you increase the D, because you are increasing D for both M1 and M2 together, so path length difference is not there. But what is happening, your mirrors is actually collecting light from broad source, not coming as if like from a point source. It is coming from the entire portion of the, more portion of the stars, this will be collecting. So that is why this is called spatial. I think I could convey you the situation. This because of the spatial coherence, the incoming light, the interference fringe will not observe. So that means if you keep on increasing, this interference fringe slowly will die down. Okay, thus by varying D and recording the fringe visibility, same way like they are depending on the path length difference, you are recording the visibility, and that visibility actually gives you the idea how much is your coherence length or temporal coherence. Here you are increasing the D, and that D actually increasing D, also your fringe visibility will be reducing, even though you apparently see that path length difference is both beams are identical, but that is coming because of this angular separation, spatial variation is there. Okay. Thus, by varying D and recording the fringe visibility, we can determine delta theta s and subsequently can estimate the value of D from the knowledge of L, if L is known, of course. So, my point is that if I can get an idea of delta theta, idea of delta theta s. Once we know delta theta s, this idea, then multiply by L, then I can get a diameter. Okay. So how that is done, if you see, when D is sufficiently small, you get this type of fringe pattern. This type of fringe pattern, where you get? You get in this screen. This is the screen you are getting. And you're supposed to get this type of fringe, this type of thing, depending on the path length you are getting. And there is actually some kind of diffraction will be there. There outer, some spots will be there. Actually, this is the fringe originally actually obtained by what do you call that, this in 1920s by I think Robert Hanbury Brown, and before that some other guy was demonstrating, but I forgot that thing. Anyway, I think this is the experimental measurement was done earlier to measure this contrast. And you see, what is the visibility, how you can measure? You know, this is a bright, dark, it is there. So along the screen, you see the interference pattern, depending on the beam size you are getting. Now you see the maxima and the next minima. That is I max and that is your I minimum. So visibility is I max minus I minimum by I max plus I minimum. This is the visibility. And you know, there also in Michelson interferometer, we have used this visibility is nothing but this correlation function, right? Et and Et plus tau, and you have integrated, you take a average value, and that is actually G1. So here also you calculate this G1 value. Okay, and this G1 actually depends on, instead of tau, we are writing this G1. That's a first order correlation function that is actually depends on D. And of course, how much delta theta is there. If delta theta is very, very small, okay, then this G1 will be, accordingly that value will be there. And lambda I have just put because this is, you are filtering only for a particular lambda. That is the thing you have put down. And this Michelson interferometer actually little bit, it is objectivity is used, but sometimes that thing can be made little bit easier without objective. You can actually try to create your interference pattern also in this measurement. So this is also one setup they have used, instead of, because such a huge good quality lens was not there. So this type of things you can have a D distance, and one ray is coming, mirror here, and another mirror you are getting, and then you can have just some kind of concave mirror is there, so that you can bring back two beams to interfere here in this here. Actually you can actually image here interference pattern. So now what you would do, as I said, that as you keep on increasing D, the visibility will be dropping. So if you just keep on increasing the D value, the visibility, y-axis is the visibility. If you see the solid line here, solid line, the visibility will be, it will be plus minus. That means at this particular point, what you see, that where a maxima is supposed to be there, their minimum will come. That's why negative value will be coming here. So in this type of situation will be there. So that is basically your first order correlation function you are getting experimentally. But it can be, we say that this for a certain D value, if you keep on increasing this D value here, lambda and delta theta is your fixed value there, right? Then what happens for a given delta theta is the angle you see at your measurement point from the distant star, right? And you keep on increasing DD, and then your visibility drops, and exactly at when D equal to 1.22 lambda by delta theta is, according to the your diffraction limit and interferometer instrumentation limit, this value visibility will become 0 here. Okay, so that is your standard formula we use, that this is the resolution power basically. That is where actually resolving power, I would say. So for particular value, their visibility will drop. So interference pattern will be dropping. So D you are bringing from 0 and keep on increasing, and then your interference, this Imax minus I minima is drop, and here it is becoming 0. So now this value, if you see, if you just see D times D theta is by lambda equal to 1.22. D is known, that is your value, right? And you know delta theta is, and then you know lambda value, then you can find out the delta theta is value. So once you know delta theta is value, right? Once you find that one, then you can just go for your once ultimately you are knowing D, and you know that for which D you are getting this 0 value, that D you take, and taking that D you are calculating delta theta is. So once you get delta theta is, then you can calculate your D value. Okay, so this is the method, people. And another curve, I'm coming to that point a little while later, this dashed line, because that is the important part, that modification came from our this Robert Hanbury Brown and Richard Quentin Twiss. I will come to that point. So before that, so this what could they measure actually? So in the original experiment, they said the maximum practical value of D was about 6 meters. So they have used 6 meter separation maximum value. Okay, from they could increase up to 6 meters they could do, because one of the major problem is that you have to create this interference pattern, right? So you have to fix this mirror with a suitable mechanical system, so that they are vibration free, because vibration can actually wash out your interference pattern. You will not be able to see visibility. So the practical distance is 6 meter, and the angular resolution delta theta. So d, if it is 6 meter, then angular resolution, how much you can measure, you can calculate from this value. So for example, if you put d equal to 6 meter and lambda, say visible light, you are using maybe sodium lamp line, sodium line, maybe 500 nanometer or so, then you can calculate this delta theta r, and that will be minimum delta theta r will be 10 to the minus 7 radian. Okay. So if you use d equal to 6 meter, then your resolving power will be 10 to the minus 7 radian. So that means any star creating an angle, spreading angle to your measurement point is about 10 to the minus 7 radian, you will be able to measure for this instrument. So you could increase the d value, then this value will be even smaller. Distant star will be able to, even smaller star at a particular distance, you will be able to measure. So this was sufficient to determine the size of the red giant. Some red giant Betelgeuse in Orion constellation, which has delta theta is this one. They could measure, because minimum is 10 to the minus 7, but they could measure which one is the little higher than that, 2.2 10 to the minus 7. Okay. This was the first discovery from the distant star. What is the thing? And they verified with some other available method, and somehow it was working. And because this type of telescope, if it is handy, then you can just rotate different direction, and you can find a distant star and what is their situation, what lines coming, lambda, everything you can measure. So now here we discuss about the what the limitation. One limitation is that I said, so we need to increase the d to improve the angular resolution delta theta of the stellar interferometer. However, it becomes more and more difficult to hold the collection mirror steady enough to observe the interference fringes for larger d values. So that's a mechanical problem. One limitation is there, you cannot increase d. And second requirement is that the actual difference between the two paths must be small compared with the coherence length of the light. You are collecting a light, right? And a certain lambda you are filtering. That or particular line, maybe certain transition line you are using, and depends on the coherence length. And that coherence length, whatever d you are using, right? So that d, even if it is a point source, if it is coming from a point source, but if depending on the d, actually some kind of path length difference will be there from one point to another point, and that coherence length will be disturbing also. So you will not be able to see the if coherence length is not sufficient, you will not be able to see the good. That means temporal coherence, I mean to say, that also play a role. And the most serious trouble is that the atmospheric scintillations. In your measurement system, you are measuring in Earth, you have atmosphere, you have beam steering will be there. Somehow your beam is coming, while coming it may come through different type of refraction, etc. So that will be also having some problems. Okay, so these are the problems actually. Then these people came with a different idea, that is called instead of your normal interferometer, Michelson interferometer, that is actually you are measuring the amplitude, basically electric field, how they are interfering. That is what G1, first order coherence, first order correlation function. So these people actually came with the idea that we need to increase d value for sure to get the resolution, but increasing d, if it is just you are measuring the simple interference and visibility, dark bright visibility, if you are trying to measure, then it is very difficult, because that you need a vibration isolation, all those type of things. It's a challenging task. So instead of that, what they do, they use a too large mirror. Okay, too large mirror, and in the baseline they put like this. Okay, and then that mirrors are like a paraboloid concave mirror. Okay, so light coming from distant star, they can focus, and in the focal point you can have a detector. So D1 and D2. So you are detecting, before interfering, you are just directly detecting the intensity here. Okay, so you don't need to see the fringe pattern. You directly just measure the intensity. And once you measure the intensity, you have current basically. Okay, this two, you can have a photomultiplier tube here. Photomultiplier tube, depending on that, you can just magnify the current, right? Okay, and that current, I think some low pass filter, some filters will be there, some modulations, everything that I will discuss a little later. So you can actually filter a certain low pass filter, so that only any modulation frequency is there. You can just whatever the current is there, that current with a lower frequency range, you just filter and you multiply these two current basically. That's why electronic multipliers are available. So you can actually see the I1 times I2. So whatever I1 times I2 you measure here, that actually can give you the idea of angular spreading. So in that case, it simplifies enormously, that you can increase your D as much as you can. Your resolving power, you can just increased many folds, 100 times. If D increases, that means your delta theta R will be increasing according to normal concept, whenever you are just imaging from collecting light from distance thing. Okay, so here just I point-wise I just mentioned 5 different points. So light from a star is received on the two separated photoelectric detectors D1 and D2. That's a photomultiplier basically they used, and produces output current I1, I2 respectively. These currents fluctuate. You know, this current, this is interesting point. Now you should keep in mind, and slowly we will be going towards our quantum nature of the photon will be coming. But here, whatever in that time they used it in a different way. They used the intensity fluctuation. That's why it is called intensity interferometer. So the current fluctuates and fluctuate, and an intensity interferometer relies on the fact that the fluctuations are partially correlated. Okay, the principal component of the fluctuation is the classical short noise associated with any current, but you know, photodetector is there, photomultiplier is there. So photomultiplier, you have a short noise will be there. That short noise, where from that will come? You know that the short noise actually the fundamental limit, quantum limit, that is actually basically how electrons are generated, and depending on that electron and the Fourier transform we have discussed now, that short noise actually depends on how much intensity of the current, average current. If it is more, short noise will be more. So those short noise fluctuations will be there. But this short noise created in D1 and D2, they may not be much correlated. They are not correlated because they are actually internal detectors. This detector is one thing and this detector is D2 another. So short noise does not depends on your incoming stream of light, right? Intensity, it depends on intensity, but it is short noise, it is an inherent property of your detector, right? So that you cannot, that electron, quantum nature of the electron, that's pulse generating, and that is the short noise. Okay, so the classical short noise associated with any current, but in addition there is a smaller component called wave noise, which is correspond to fluctuation in the intensity of the light wave. This light wave, when it is coming, this light wave will be actually can be fluctuating. Intensity can be fluctuating, right? And then this intensity, like fluctuation, the short noise I rule out. The intensity fluctuation, when it is coming, that intensity fluctuation here also will be there. If these two beam, they are coming from the same portion of your distant star, then they will be highly correlated, because their fluctuation will be similar. But as you pick from a distant point, so this one where from it is picking, and this is where from it is picking, they are coming from the distance one, their correlation will start dropping. So this technique, this I1, I2, whenever you are measuring, I1, I2 is basically intensity dependent. This I1, I2 is intensity dependent. So that I1, I2, if you just try to see the correlation, that correlation actually depends on this D. That correlation, that light intensity fluctuation, if it is there, because it is coming from a distant star, so intensity will fluctuate. Even from a certain particular point it is coming, that intensity will be fluctuating. Little bit fluctuation can happen depending on the source, basically. That's the source nature, source, whatever it is emitting. And as you keep on increasing D value, that correlation will be dropping. So looking into that as a function of D, that correlationship, actually you can actually find the delta theta knowledge. Okay, but there you don't need to bother about their actually interference pattern, their phase, how much delay it is there. You don't need to bother about that. You are just measuring the intensity. That's it. And that intensity correlation you are getting. So that's why you need to define different type of correlation function instead of G1. You are measuring directly the intensity instead of you are just not summing amplitude, E tau, ET, and if you see the Michelson interference, ET plus tau you measure. But here you just measuring the intensity, and whatever current is being generated, their correlation you are measuring. And looking into that correlation, you can actually find the diameter. And in this way, actually, if you see that here, they could measure up to 10 to the power minus 7 delta theta is. Smaller than this could not be measured, because their maximum limitation is 6 meters. I remember that in 1930s to 1950s, some other guy, I think his name is Pease, he tried some measurement by increasing the 6 meter into 15 meter. But because of the stability problem, etc., he could not really measure. No data could be recovered, and that project was completely abandoned after 15 years. So then in this method came out from this Hansbury Brown and Twiss, and they demonstrated this in between 54 and 56 in and keeping these two mirror at a distance of, they could put that distance up to 156 meter, I think. Yeah, 156 or 96, some distance is there. I have to check and tell. So with that, they could actually brought down the resolution. This delta theta is 10 to the power minus 9. So that means because of this improvement, actually it actually really changed the research of our particularly space research. All this different type of giant star or different smaller stars, everything could be identified. And now you know that all this space technology, particularly astronomy, advantage, how our universe originated, all this type of thing, history and everything could be demonstrated. Okay, so from here, I think I will just discuss that this intensity fluctuation from the distance thing, this can be actually explained classically, but that classical nature later on actually translated into that correlation function. Depending on the correlation function, you can actually find out that the photon, any photon source, whether that is a bunching or coherent states or anti-bunching. Bunching means, you know, coherent states, it has a particular well-meaning function will be there. But bunching means you can say that, okay, whenever you see the photons are like a bosons, right? So it is not like a fermions. They try to tend to maintain certain distance, as we have explained earlier, for sub-Poissonian electron source generating lights, sub-Poissonian light. So that is possible for electron, but for bosons normally tend to bunch together. So one photon is there, another photon, 3-4 photons together maybe, and then large space is there. So that type of bunching is actually a natural tendency for photons, because it can occupy same space, same type of energy states, and that is why it is possible. But you can also have kind of source where the photons, they can be actually spreaded with a well distance. Maybe within a very small variation, you can say regularly it will be coming. That is called anti-bunched photons. That is what it's ideal for our quantum photonic applications. But there will be some photon bunching will be there and coherent state. But using this type of measurement system, actually you can quantify how good is your source towards quantum nature. Okay, that means sub-Poissonic or not. So whenever you are measuring you are creating a source, whether that is actually giving you a single photon source or anti-bunched source and anti-bunched photon or not, you can actually devise like this type of things. As you know, this is a photo detector, everything is there, and you are using large mirror here to collect light. And if you want to go for a quantum photonics device, basically you can have a waveguide coming from one source, and then you can split. You can get 2 different sources and you collect them, and their correlation you can find out. If they are correlated and their particular value you get, then you can say that, okay, how is the nature of that one. So next I will be discussing about that correlation function. Correlation, if you are measuring your current, and from that current how you can get correlation function classically and quantum mechanically, and that slowly we will move to actual application point of view. So I stop here today.